Right.
Good evening, everyone.
Danielov, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you. Okay. Okay.
Danielov, we were still in the bit Yosef.
That's right. So here it goes. רבנו, מה שכתב רבנו, הילקח אין לאכול גבינה אחר הבשר. So the Torah said, don't eat cheese after meat, עד שישיר קישור מזמן סעודת הבוקר עד זמן סעודת הערב. You have to wait from the morning meal to the evening meal, right? So as we said, right, that's like 6 hours, according to the Rambam and so forth. שם בפרק כל הבשר אמר מורוקווה אנא בהא מילתא חלה בר חמרה. Yeah, so this one we did this thing, I think. Yeah. Yeah, okay, we'll read it anyway. So it says, right, as we said this last time, we mentioned this Gemara that Mor Ukva, right, he said that compared, to my father, right, I'm pretty shabby because my father would wait until the morning meal from the night. So that was like, 10, 12 hours, whatever. And he says, I only wait, from the morning meal to the evening meal, which is like 6 hours. So, so that's the way it was, right? Yeah, I'm not as good as my father was. My father was better than me. But anyway, right, from this story, what do we learn, right? Halachically speaking, what do we glean out of this? כתב הריף, ושמינן מהד דהד דאמר, רב חסדא אכל בשר אסור לאכול גבינה, דלא שרב מדמך גבינה, בתר ביסה אלא דשא אלה שיעור מה דצריך סעודת תכליתה. So as we said, right, you have to wait till the next meal. ולא אשכחנינן מן דשא אלה מיכל גבינה, בתר ביסה. We don't find anybody who says who allows to eat cheese after meat, פחות מהי שורה, less than this. דהא מור עוקבא אף על גב דשא אלה Kihai Shura Kare Nafshe Chala Hamra. Because as we said, right, this rabbi was saying that he was inferior to his father, and he was doing like 6 hours, right? So you got to do at least that much. כתב הראש בסעודתה אחריתה הכינה הפירוש בזמן שאדם רגיל לסעוד. דהיינו בזמן סעודת בוקר עד זמן סעודת הערב. So the Rosh says, right, that means from breakfast to dinner. The time that it takes to elapse, that time. That's what we're talking about. So, which is like 6 hours. Um, because let's just write for demonstration's sake. What are we talking about? Let's say they were eating breakfast, around 10 o'clock, for argument's sake, right? So then they would have dinner, around, let's say, 5, 6, whatever, whatever it was. So that's what we're talking about. Let's say 5 o'clock, right, for argument's sake. So, let's say 11 to 5, right? So we're talking about 6 hours minimum from breakfast to dinner. So that's the minimum amount of time that it takes, according to the Rosh, from one Seudah to another. We already saw other opinions which were more lenient, right? What they said was, basically all you need to do is just, go to your next meal. It could be right one after the other. That's still called the next meal. So anyway, but we don't go like that, halachically speaking. We paskin like this opinion. פחות מישהו זה, אין לאכול גבינה אחר בשר. כתוב בהגה על זה, וכן כתב מימונים, צריך שישש 6 שעות, right, as we said. These rabbis say you gotta wait 6 hours. היינו דלא כהלכות הגדולות רבנו תם. Not like הלכות גדולות רבנו תם, והתוספות שפירשו בסעודת תכלית החנינא, לא בסעודה שרגילים לעשות אחד שחרית ואחד ערבית, אלא אפילו לאלתר. As we said, right, they go the lenient opinion, which is that, it's one after the other, like, consecutive. Even that's called another meal. לאלתר, האם סילק וברך מותר, דלא פלוג לרבנן. The rabbis didn't differentiate between one thing and another. So what do I mean to say by that? That doesn't really matter how long you take from one meal to another, how much time elapses. It's still called another meal because of the fact that you said Birkat Hamazon, and then you went, and you did another meal. You did Hamotzi and did another meal. So that's the way they hold. Okay, so anyway, so we have several poskim, right, who say the 6 hour thing, פרק ט' מלכות מאכלות אסורות, כתבו עוד שלדעת רבנו תם הלכות גדולות מר עוקבא שלא אכל גבינה עד סעודת אחרת מחמיר על עצמו היה. So according to them, he says, right, these rabbis who are lenient, when this rabbi said that he waits from one meal to another, right, meaning what, from breakfast to dinner, he was talking about, he was being mahmir. He was a chumrah. He wasn't really halacha, according to this opinion. Okay, והעולם נהגו כדברי הרמב"ם, right? So, as we said, right, the custom is like the Rambam, which means we wait 6 hours. וכן פסק הרשב"א, Rashba also says like that toward the bite, וכתבו הרמב"ם ברשב"א ששיעור זה צריך להמתין אפילו אחר בשר עוף. So they said, right, you have to wait 6 hours also after you eat chicken, whatever, fowl. So it's all the same, like today, for some reason I felt like having in the morning like some schnitzel. I had some schnitzel in the fridge, so I ate the schnitzel. It was around, let's say, 11 o'clock, whatever it was. So then I didn't have dairy until I came back from shul. It was like 5:30. So I waited like 6 hours, or a little bit, yes, about that. That's how I did it, and it's what it is.
Schnitzel's meat?
That's what we're saying, right? Even fowl.
A schnitzel is a meat, though?
Schnitzel is chicken.
Oh. Oh,
Right.
all right. I thought it was a pastry.
Oh, strudel. It's about strudel.
Oh, dang. Yeah, you're right. Okay.
Schnitzel is Ashkenazi, word for chicken breast.
Oh,
It's like the European, thing.
I see.
Yeah. So okay, that's the way it is. Yeah. So schnitzel, strudel, two different things. Don't get them mixed up. Okay. So okay, good. So that's the way it goes, and so we have to wait even from chicken, even from fowl. ואם יש בשר בין השיניים צריך להסירו, right? Also, he says another thing, which is that if there is meat, stuck between the teeth, you have to remove it. So what does that mean? Even if you waited 6 hours, right? And you see that you still have some meat, like remnants jammed, between your teeth. You gotta, take a toothpick and get it out before you eat the dairy meal. Because otherwise you'll be eating them together, right? In essence, that's what it is. Okay. Okay, that's great. So let's move on. ואם יש בשר בין השיניים, כן כתב רבא, says רד"ש says, חידושיו חידושים בשם בעל העיטור, נגד בעל העיטור. שאם יש בשר בין שיניו, ואפילו שהה צריך להוציאו, כתב שנראים דבריו. So it says, if there is meat, as we said, right, between the teeth, you gotta, pluck it out of there, pry it out. Take some floss, whatever, get it out of there. ואפילו שעה צריך להוציאו, כתב שנראה דבריו, וכן פסק רבנו ירוחם. ובספר יורדיה, סימן פ"ט, כתב רבנו שזה לדעת האומרים. So over there, right, in the Yordea, it says the Tur, that this is according to the one who says שהטעם שצריך לשהות הוא לפי שהבשר מוציא שומן ומושך טעם עד זמן ארוך. So over there he says, right, that this is according to the opinion that says the reason why we have to wait 6 hours is because the meat has fat, and therefore, the taste remains for a long time. What does that mean? The taste remains in the mouth. Rambam, but according to Rambam, Shenatan Tam Leshia, but Rambam said it was because of the, between the teeth, right? Whatever gets jammed in there. משום בשר שבין השיניים, לאחר ששהה כשיעור מותר, אפילו נשאר בשר בין השיניים. So then it will be allowed even if it's, there is some meat left there. וכן עוד שאם לא אכל בשר אלא לאסור לתינוק. So he says another thing, let's say you didn't even eat meat. All you did was just, you chewed it up for a child, for a baby to eat, whatever, toddler. According to the first reason, you wouldn't have to wait 6 hours. Because since you didn't eat it, it's not going to, have an aftertaste in your mouth. According to Rambam, he says you have to wait. So he says, therefore, what you should do is, the proper thing is to be stringent from both sides. Whichever reason, you're holding by, use both of them. So go stringent both sides. So no matter whether the reason is because the taste remains in the mouth for a long time. What does that mean? It remains in the mouth. That means it doesn't digest very fast. So it comes back up. It's still not digested basically. Meat takes a long time to digest. So that's the reason why you gotta wait 6 hours, according to that opinion. That's according to Rashi. But according to Rabbi, the reason is because you have teeth between you have meat stuck between your teeth. So right, depending on which reason you go by, there's going to be different results, right? Outcomes, in halakha. So he says, try to be stringent from both sides. Okay. So basically, right, bottom line is you got to wait 6 hours. That's what it's all about. There are several poskim, who write that if you wait 5.5 hours, it's okay. That's good enough. Why is that? Because it's like a majority, of the six. It's almost six. Like, once you pass 5.5, if you have a need for that, right, so you can be lenient a little bit there. Because it's like it's almost six there, so it's like six. Yeah, so there's room to be lenient with that. 5.5, you can get away with that. Okay, great. So let's move on. כתב הר"ן, says the ר"ן, נראים הדברים שמי שאכל בשר ושהה קצת ואחר כך מצא בשר בין שיניו, שלא צריך כדי לסעודת מאותו זמן שנטל לבשר משם, אלא מאכילה ראשונה חשבינן לזמן שהיה מיהו קינוח הפה משמע דבעי. So he says something interesting, right? Which is that, let's say you had meat, and then you found something between your teeth, some meat. So the question is, do you have to wait from the time you ate or from the time that you found, this meat in between your teeth? So he says, really the rule is, that we wait from the time we ate, not from the time of teeth. So therefore, this is like more lenient, we can be a little bit lenient with that. Right? But he says, but if you're talking to me about eating, right, meat after cheese, right, whatever, dairy, so there it's allowed right away, right? You don't have to wait at all. There are, by the way, different customs regarding that. There are some communities that are stringent about that a little bit, or whatever, all kinds of things. But basically, the general rule is, that after you ate dairy, you can have meat right away. This is the basic halacha. The Zohar is a little bit more stringent with that. And also, there are some Ashkenazi customs, to be stringent regarding aged cheese, which was aged like for 6 months or a year, whatever, God knows. That they wait, they wait some time before they go to meat because they say that the aged cheese takes time to digest, also. So, okay, but, in general, right, that's the rule. The rule is right away. Most cheese that we buy, in the store today is not really aged, unless you're getting that, very salty stuff, like what do they call that, right? The Parmesan and God knows what else, right? All kinds of things like this. Very salty cheese, So those sometimes are aged like 6 months or 3 months or God knows what. But otherwise, most cheeses, on the market today, your standard cheese is not aged 6 months or whatever. It's not aged at all. So you don't really have an issue with those. Okay. For sure, mozzarella is not aged, right? So if you're having pizza, mozzarella or cheese, whatever. There's no problem with that. Italian dishes, whatever, right? Okay, so that's the story there. So regarding that, it says also another thing the Torah says here. It says if you see, right, that your hands are clean, and so you don't have to wash really. right? Because there's nothing to wash off. What are you washing? Your hands are clean. So regarding this, says the Beit Yosef, Pashut b'pekol kol basar. That's what it says in the Chulin, Kuf Dad Amud Bet. Katav Rabbeinu Yerucham, says Rabbeinu Yerucham, hu adin v'layla. Same thing as also im yesh lo ner yafeh. If he has good lighting at night, the same thing would apply as well. It doesn't matter whether it's daytime or good lighting at night. Enot tzarich netilat. You don't have to wash your hands. Umiu katav Rabbeinu b'sefer Yoredea. But it says the two wrote in Yoredea, Siman Pei Tet, right, chapter 89. B'shem Rabbeinu Peretz, right, name of this rabbi. Sheyesh derachatzam af b'yom. That you should wash them even in the daytime. Lefi shefamim shegvina shmena v'nidbeket ben lachlochit hayadayim. So he says, right, sometimes what happens is that the cheese, is like very fatty, so it like sticks to the hands, and sometimes you don't notice it. It's kind of like the residue was there, whatever. So therefore, you got to be careful, he says. Okay. So this rabbi also says this. B'shem Samak, name is Samak. V'katav Rashba b'Torah Rabbi. It says the Rashba, Shatam shemutar lechol basar achar gvina. So he says, why is it allowed to eat meat after cheese right away? Miyad. U'mipnei she'agvina raka hi ve'ena mitakevet ben hashinayim. Right. Look what it says, right? Because it says the cheese is soft. It doesn't get stuck between the teeth. That's what it says in also this rabbi. So he says some are stringent, as we said, right? Not to eat meat after cheese in one meal. They don't want to eat in one meal. Right? Why? Because it says in the Zohar, as we said, right? There is a Zohar about this. Right? Where is this in Parshat Mishpatim? In the Zohar, right? Where is this in page 125a, right? If you want to see in the Zohar. Says Ashkechan dechol man de'achil hay michla kechada o b'shata chada o b'seudata chada 40 yomin itchazia gadia mekalsa v'kalfroi legabe inun dele'ela v'siyata mesava mitkarvin behade v'garim lit'ara dinin be'alma. Wow, look what it says. Strong words from the Zohar. Right? Look at it. What does it say? It says, whoever eats, right, meat and cheese together, right, dairy and meat together, or right, in the same hour, right, or the same seudah, the same meal. So it says, right, that 40 יומין התחזיה גדיה מקלסה מקלפו ידגע בעינון דלילה וסייתם מסבה מתקרבין בהדה וגרים להתערה דינים מהמה. So he says there's some certain reaction this has in the heavens, right? That brings like judgments to the world. So as we said, right, it's very harmful, this reaction that you get when you eat meat and milk together. So that's why we got to be careful about that. But according to the Zohar, it even applies when you're eating them in one meal, even though you're not eating them together. So he says, therefore, what happens is, right, if you have a child at that time, you bear a child. Right? In those days, those 40 days. So he says, right, it goes for 40 days, this thing, In other words, the harm that's done by that is a 40-day reaction. So if you bear a child in those 40 days, right? So it says, Nishmatam misitra acha. It comes from the evil side, that soul, right? So you get a bad soul there, because of this. There you go. וכבר כתב המורכי שמהר"ם היה נוהג שלא לאכול בשר בהמה וחיה אחר גבינה לפי שפעם אחת מסעודה לסעודה, מצא גבינה בין שיניו, right? So he says, right, there was a certain rabbi, the Ram, that his custom was he wouldn't eat meat after right cheese. Why? Because one time he says, right, he found like a piece of cheese, in his mouth when he was eating the meat. So he decreed upon himself not to do this again, to make the same mistake again. ולא כמוסיף שהוא גורע החזין על פרק כל הבשר, אינה להמילתא כחלב מלחמה. כל אחד מצא להחמור נפשי. So he says, right, this rabbi that, you can be stringent if you want, you don't have to be lenient. Just like this rabbi that we found in the Talmud that he was stringent. So here also he says you can be stringent, and it's not called, like you're arguing with the Talmud. No, it's just, personal stringency you took upon yourself. Nothing wrong with that. Okay. But he says, when it comes to, he says, foul, I'm lenient, he says. I'm not stringent about that. Because, it says in the Talmud, that we're not so stringent with that. So therefore, right, there's room to be more lenient when it comes to fowl than beef, red meat. Okay. But the truth is, even though he brings this Zohar in the Beit Yosef, but in the Shulchan Aruch he paskins like, the regular, meaning that you can have it right away. He's not stringent about it. So he says it must be right that he didn't see the Zohar, this rabbi. And he was still stringent upon himself, because he had this thing that happened to him, this accident. Even though he was lenient when it comes to foul, because he didn't see the Zohar, he says. So he says, but for us that we saw the Zohar, then it's proper, he says, and good to be stringent like the Zohar. So he's not telling you right that it's an obligation, but it's it's a good stringency to do like the Zohar. Okay. All right, very good. Let's move on. So he says, ospat, right? So the question is now, right, how do you clean your mouth in order to get ready, to have your other course? So what are we talking about here? When you're going from dairy to meat, right? It says in the tour that you got to clean your mouth. So the question is, how do you clean your mouth? Do you have to go to the bathroom and brush your teeth? Is that what it is? So truth is, you don't have to go that far. It's not necessary. So what do? You take some bread, or some food, and you chew it, and you swallow it. That's called you clean your mouth. So you don't need to leave the table, just go on, and just stay there and do it right there on the spot. So therefore, right, the proper thing to do is when a person is going, from one course to another, and he's changing, the right type of food that he's eating, right? For instance, let's say he's going from from fish to meat, or he's going from dairy to meat, So you can do that, but the thing is, you gotta, make sure your mouth is clean and your hands are clean, right? So as we said, right, it really depends on if you eat with hands or eat with a fork. If you eat with a fork, there's no reason to wash your hands. But but regardless of that, if you are, if your mouth is not clean, and you still have remnants of fish there or whatever, or dairy, and you want to go to meat now, so what you got to do is, take something to eat, and that'll cleanse your mouth. So the truth is, right now, that it says there in the tour that anything cleans the mouth, any food, except two things, right? What is that? Tamre v'yarka. What is that? Dates, right? And vegetables. Those don't do the job. They can't clean your mouth. But any other food besides that will do the job. So let's take a look at the tour inside, probably better, so we can get the whole text without any interruption. Let's just read through this whole thing, because it's really very informative. It says like this in the tour. כתב בהג, it says the בהג, שאוכל בשר מותר לאכול אחרי גבינה, right? If you eat meat, you can have right away, cheese right away afterwards. על ידי קינוח ונטילה. But you need to wash your hands and clean your mouth. ואוכל גבינה מותר, and also if you eat cheese, מותר לאכול בשר מיד, you can have meat right away afterwards. אף בלא קינוח ונטילה, even without washing your hands and cleaning your mouth. כתב אדוני אברוסה, we don't paskin like that, but that's the opinion of the Bahag. He says, the Rosh says, ולא נהגו העולם כן, he says, the custom is not like that. אלא נוהגים שלא לאכול גבינה אחר הבשר. אפילו הוא בשר עוף, ואין לשנות המנהג. So the custom is that we don't eat cheese after meat. Even if it was foul. ואין לשנות המנהג, הילקח אין לאכול גבינה. It says you shouldn't change this custom, therefore you shouldn't eat cheese אחר הבשר after the meat, עד שישהה כשהוא מזמן סעודת הבוקר עד זמן סעודת הערב. You should have to wait till the next meal, right? The time for the next meal. ואם יש בשר בין השיניים, but if you have meat which is stuck between the teeth, צריך להסירו, you have to remove that. ובשר אחר גבינה מותר מיד. But he says having meat after cheese is allowed right away. How do you do it? You got to, as we said, right, clean your mouth, wash your hands. נטילת ידיים. ואם הוא יום ורואה שידיו נקיות, and if he sees, right, that his hands are clean, he doesn't have to really wash his hands. והקינוח הוא של עוס פת ויקנח בו בפיו יפה, או בכל דבר שחוצץ מקמחה דשרה. Right, so he says, right, that you can use anything, as we said, to clean your mouth, except two things, right? What are those two things? Kimcha is flour. Sara is barley. Because those are soft. They stick to the teeth. Also, we don't use dates or vegetables, ואחר קינוח ידיח פיו, and after you wash your mouth out, you clean your mouth, then take a drink of water also, right, to wash your mouth, or bayain, right, or with wine. Okay, that's it. That's the whole tour. So now let's go back to Beit Yosef. So it says, "Ve'achal kinoach yodiach piv b'mayim or b'yain." As we said, after you clean your mouth with bread or whatever food, then also wash it out with some water or some wine, right? In other words, take a sip. Sham Tanya, where's the source for this? It's in the Baita there. Bet Shammai, right? It says Bet Shammai, Omrim says, B'kaneach Bet Hillel Omrim Mediach. One says to clean, one says to wash. והסיכנא דבית שמאי אומרים מקנח והוא הדין למדיח, ודין אומרים מדיח והוא הדין למקנח. So he says the truth is we do both, because that's what they really meant, these rabbis, to do both. Umor amar chada, umor amar chada. Velo pligi uperesh Rashi, they don't really argue, he says here, there's no argument. So Rashi explains, והוא הדין דתרוויו בעינן, it says we really read both of them. וגם הריף כתב הילקח באר קינוח ולדחה. The Rif also says, right, that therefore we need both, you know? So what does that mean? You need to do two things, right? Besides washing your hands. You gotta clean your mouth with food and then wash your mouth with a drink. In other words, to take a sip. You don't have to gargle it out, you know, something like that, right? There's no reason for that. Take a sip. That's good enough. Okay. So then he moves on. Rashi explains the madiach lekatane hainu hadachat peh v'chein yireh midivra tosot v'rosh. So he says, right, that means you have to, as we said, right, take a sip, whatever. Katav gaot maimoniot b'shem maram she'en tzarich ledaktik b'kinuach peh v'adacha ela yizeh mehem shirutzei yaktim. So he says, right, this rabbi, that it doesn't really matter which one you do first, right? The food and the drink. You could do either order, whichever order you want. ואפשר שאף על פי שרבנו כתב כאן בספר יהודיה, so he says it's possible that even though that Rabbeinu, right, the Tur, wrote here and also in Yehudea, שכנך פיו ואחר כך, that first you should do the cleaning and then, right, the washing. לאו דווקא, he says that's not really precise. You know, in other words, either way is fine. דהוא הדין אם עבד איפך, same thing also applies if you did the opposite. Shapir dame, no problem. Okay, great. Let's see how much more we got here. Okay, there's still a lot more. We'll finish it tomorrow, but let's see if we can do a little bit more here before we wrap it up. Okay. Okay, so Rashi explains, "V'hu adin the tarbayu bainan." Says we need both. וגם הריף וכתב, right, ילקח באי קינוח ודחה. He also says we need both. לכן כתב ראש, also the rosh, right? So everybody seems to agree with that. You need both of them. In other words, the cleaning and the washing. פירש רש"י, דמדיח תקטנה, היינו הדחת פה, וכן נראה מדברי התוספות, בראש, כתב הגאות מימוניות, שמרם שאין צריך לדקדק בקינוח. Yeah, this one we did, I think. Right. We did this, I'm sorry. כתוב עוד הגות מימוניות, says also this rabbi, שמנהגו של ריבה, לאחר שאכל גבינה, so he says the minhag of this rabbi was that after he ate cheese, היה עושה הדחה לידיו, right, ולפיו. He would wash his hands and also his mouth. והיה מכניס אצבעו לתוך פיו, and he says he would put his finger inside his mouth, ובודק יפה, he would check what's going on in there, right? כדי שלא יהיה שום דבר בפיו. You know, there should be nothing in his mouth. You know, he was very exacting about that. ואחר כך עושה קינוח הפה, and then, right, he wash out your mouth. רבנו יהודה כתב שרי היה שורה פיתו במים. So this rabbi says that the Ri had a different custom, which is that he would dip the bread into water or to wine, ואוכל כי he would eat. So that would be like both in one shot, you know? Washing and, you know, cleaning. Got both of them there. בעניין הזה יעלה בשביל לשניהם, בשביל קינוח הדחת פיו, או אוכל דבר שמקנחים בו ושותה יין או מים. Or, right, the other option, as we said, is that he'll eat something which, you know, is abrasive a little bit to the body and mouth, and then he'll drink also, right, as we said, and that'll take care of it. Rabbeinu כתב בספר יורדיה, סימן פ"ט, it says the tour in פ"ט, יש נוהגים לשתות פת ומים. As we said, right, some, as we said, they soak the water, the bread and water, or ביין or in wine, ולאכלו, והוא עולה בשביל השכינוח ודחה, ויותר טוב להיות כל אחד ואחד בפני עצמו. But he says, even though some people do it together, you know, like in one shot, you know, with bread dipped into water or into wine, but he says better to do them separately, you know? First the eating and then the drinking. Okay. What about the Rambam? What does he say about this? לא הזכיר הדחה פה, so he didn't really mention the washing of the mouth, כלל, ומתוך לשונו משמע, זה מדיח לקטן אליו הדחת פה, הוא אליו מטילת ידיים. So right, according to his Rambam, apparently you don't need to wash the mouth, you know, just to clean it. And when it talks about washing, it's talking about really washing the hands. ובית שמאי עירו בהכשר פה ובית הלל בהכשר ידיים. וכולו מודו דתרוויו בעינן. So according to this, right, we're talking about the hands and the mouth. Two different things. The Ran also says like that. What about the Rashba? יש מי שהורה, there's one that says שאין צריך לעולם קינוח פה או לאכול גבינה תחילה ואינו מחבר. It says there's one that says you don't have to really clean your mouth to eat cheese. The one who ate cheese, I'm sorry. It says that's not correct. He says כתב עוד יש לאומרים שצריך קנח פיו. Some say also you gotta, you know, clean your mouth. והוא הדין שצריך עוד להדיח פיו, and also to wash your mouth, משכין, with some kind of a drink, as we said. ויש אומרים שמקנח או מדיח, ודאי לא, right? So some say one or the other is enough. You don't need both. באחד מהם, ולזה הדת הנוטה, so that's the way he says it's logical, reasonable. והעולם נהגו, so he says now, right, after he brings all these opinions, concludes the Bet Yosef, right, להלכה, והעולם נהגו לקנח ולהדיח. So he says the custom really is to do both, you know? We clean the mouth and then we wash the mouth. How do we do that? With food and drink, you know, right? We don't go to the bathroom and gargle, you know, right? The mouthwash, the toothpaste. You don't need those things. By the time you do that, you know, your food will be gone already. You know, somebody else will eat it, right? So You'll be all right. You know what I'm saying? You don't have time for that. You're in the middle of a meal. Right? So, okay. As we said, right? So that's the custom, he says, right? So he says it's proper to be stringent. He says, there's no big deal with that. There's no there's no big effort, involved. So therefore, it's, good to be stringent. So therefore, right, the custom is like that. We try to do both. Right, that's how we go from dairy to meat. So as we said, right, if your hands are clean, you don't really need to wash your hands. But if they're not clean, so then obviously you should wash it. Make sure your hands are clean. So right, the bottom line, right, we'll stop here. But I just want to summarize this whole thing, right? So basically, when you're going from fish to meat or dairy to meat, right, which is allowed to do right away, there's no need to wait, as we said. you know. But what you do need to do, if your hands are not clean, you got to wash them. If they're clean, just leave them alone, right? Uh, but the mouth, right, which we assume is not clean because you ate, how is it going to be clean? So then what you got to do is, eat something to get, to clean the mouth, and then also to sip something, right, to wash the mouth, and you're ready to go, right, into your next course, your meat course there. As we said, right, according to the Zohar, you really shouldn't do this anyway, this kind of stuff. You got to wait like an hour, or you got to wait till the next meal, whatever. Uh, Not in one meal, But the truth is, halakha is not like that. So the Zohar is like a stringency, but the halakha is you don't have to wait. Where you do have to wait is when you're going from meat to cheese, right? So there you got to wait 6 hours. Even if the meat was chicken, fowl. Okay, that's good, right? I guess we can stop there. It's already 9:30. I won't bother you anymore. B'ezrat Hashem, thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Laila Tov, Chazak Baruch. Baruch Hashem, we have lots of good news coming in from Israel. All kinds of good stuff there. So, B'ezrat Hashem, we'll see you tomorrow, Thursday night. And Laila Tov.
Kavod Harav, thank you so much.
All the best.